Our scripture for today comes from Exodus 16:22 through 26. And we are going to read this together. So we will say, side 1 is this section and the balcony, and side 2 is the center and this section. Okay? Read with me. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is the day the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning." So they put it aside until morning, just as Moses commanded them, and it did not rot, and there were no maggots in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." The word of the Lord. The people cried out to God. They were hungry. Their bodies needed food. For generations, those bodies had been enslaved. They had been ruled by a master who had no interest in those bodies' well-being. Ruled by a master who fed those bodies only so that they could do more labor. A master who valued them only for their output, for what they could do. For generations, the people had been commodified. Their worth was in what their bodies could do. And their lives were endless labor. And now, freed from endless labor, but not freed from trauma, they cried out to God. And God responded. God heard their spoken need for food for their hungry bodies. And God responded with manna and quail, daily bread, raining down from the heavens to be gathered every day. Sustenance. But God also heard that unspoken need. God heard the cry that came from their cores that they couldn't even articulate. Their need for wholeness, their need for rest, for trust in a creator, the need for an identity that was not rooted in commodified bodies, that was not rooted in what they could do in their output. God heard that need. And God responded with Sabbath. A day every week to remember that their value is not in what they could do, but in who their Creator was. God heard their cries. God understood that sustenance of the mind and of the spirit go together, that these are inseparable. And in God's one act of the rhythm of manna and quail, the people's bodies and food and work was all decommodified. Mennonite theologian Nate Stuckey wrote a book called Wrestling with Rest. The book focuses especially on teenagers' need for Sabbath. Nate spends some time with today's passage, and here's one of the things that he has to say about it. Quote, "Humankind's truest identity cannot be found in endless labor, but is found instead in a God who provides not only food to sustain the body, but also rest and space for the flourishing of identities founded on something greater and deeper than human effort and productivity." End quote. So in other words, commodification of land and human output dishonors our truest selves. God's relationship with the people includes complete provision for their tummies and for their souls. We cry out to God, right? Most of us have full bellies, but we cry out from other symptoms. Our bodies and our minds cry out with ill health. We cry out in exhaustion, in anxiety, in feelings of worthlessness or helplessness. We cry out from situations of trauma. Commodification of humans, it's not a new story, and it's not a story that's over. We commodify bodies and knowledge and time. We value ourselves and others for what we know, for what we can do. We value time for how much we can accomplish during it. Whether it's enough time or not enough time is based on what can happen in it, right? On what we can do, on what the output can be in that span of time. Our cultural mindset is to value human bodies and minds for output and efficiency and contributions, and that's not new and it's not going away. We've been formed for generations in the mindset that our value lies in our output. And we have ill health. And we cry out to God. God hears us. God responds. God hears our spoken needs and responds with medical professionals and friends and beautiful creation. God responds to our unspoken needs too, with Sabbath. God's relationship with us, with humanity throughout all of history, with creation throughout all of history, includes complete provision, food for our tummies, rest for our souls. The invitation to Sabbath keeping is an invitation to weekly remember, as in put back together, our identity. It's an invitation to every week remember who we are and who God is. On the Sabbath, we recover our reliance on God, our identity in God, rather than reliance on ourselves and identity in all of the things. Our family has a weekly Sabbath ritual that has evolved, changed over the years, and one thing that has evolved with it is this curated playlist, our Sabbath playlist. It was in the newsletters on Friday. It's a little bit of a snapshot of our family throughout the years and how we see Sabbath. So there's a little like Salty the Singing Songbook on it. But there's also this song that I keep coming back to over these last couple of months. It's called That Shabbos Feeling. And it's to the tune of Can't Stop the Feeling, if you know what that song is. It's by this group called 613, which is, I guess I would describe it as a Jewish a cappella boy band. It's a very silly song, but it's profound. And I keep going back to it and finding these little nuggets in it. So one of the phrases is, everybody's free from worries and plans. There's another one, in every city, I feel at home. Think about that. One day a week, no matter where you are, you're coming home because you're part of the Sabbath people. And then this one. And I promise I won't sing it. My children would be mortified if I started singing this song. Took God 6 days to make this beautiful world whole. Then, on the 7th, God slowed his roll, and that's why we take 1 day to refresh our souls. Again, took God 6 days to make this beautiful world whole. Then on the 7th, God slowed his roll, and that's why we take 1 day to refresh our souls. Like God, we do all the things for 6 days. And all the things are making this beautiful world whole. Collecting manna is good. It's good work. It needs to happen. There's nothing wrong with collecting manna. All of the things, the tasks, the activities, most of them, are good. Keep them up. And often those things are part of making this beautiful world whole. For 6 days, we join God in making this beautiful world whole. But on the 7th, we join God in slowing our roll, which is slang for just slowing down a little bit, and take a day to refresh our souls. To remember that our value is not in our output, that we are not commodified minds and bodies. We are humans, created in the image of God, and our identity is in our Creator. I'm going to invite you to join me in an exercise because this month is kind of all about getting to some practicalities. So children, and Becky, if you could pass those out, try to get one to each person. So you're going to have to kind of book it around. We might need one child from the balcony to come down here to help pass out down here. Thank you all. So as these are being passed out, I have some questions. What are you tempted to root your identity in? Where do you find your worth? I'll ask this a few more ways. What spins in your mind as you fall asleep at night? What is it that occupies your energy, your resources, your time, your attention? Where does all of that go? If you get stuck on something, what are you often getting stuck on? What are you tempted to root your identity in? Where do you find your worth? Your responses are probably some really good things. For example, your vocation, right? The ways that you've been called to live your life. That's probably a lot of what is bubbling up for you. These are good things. Collecting manna is good. Don't forget that collecting manna is a really good activity, okay? In our household, we came up with some things, and I won't attach names to these except my own, but you can figure them out. We came up with fixing things, Legos, gaining knowledge, and mine was planning and feeding people, right? I like planning. I think that my ability to plan well is a gift. I get lots of pats on the back if I do it well. When I don't plan well, I feel like a total failure. I love to bake and cook and feed people. And when I don't do it well, I feel kind of worthless. I plan and I feed people. That's a lot of my identity. What are you tempted to root your identity in? Where do you find your worth? Okay, now on your bookmarks, raise your hand if you still need a bookmark. Oh, Becky needs a bookmark, and that's funny because she was passing them out. Becky, are you a helper? All right. And children, make sure you get one too, okay? If you have extras, you can decide if you want to keep them or give them to Zeph, because he can give them back to me. So fill it out. So for example, mine would be 6 days you shall plan and feed people. But on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. So grab one of those pencils that's in the pew and fill it out. It's not just a mind exercise, it's an actual exercise. In other words, whatever you fill in the blank is what you rest from on Sabbath. That's your manna. It's a really good thing that you hit the pause button on once a week so that it can return to its rightful place in your sense of self. For that one day of the week, set aside the thing that can tip over into commodifying your mind and your body. And in its place, invite God to make your heart sing. Maybe God will draw you into a different activity. Maybe God will make your heart sing in a walk in nature, or in the fellowship of the family of God, or in scripture, or in poetry. Maybe God will make your heart sing in silence. Doing is good. Collecting manna is good. Creating, helping, fixing, learning, exercising, serving. These activities are gifts from God. But your ability to do is not what gives you value. You are not a commodity. Your value is simple. You are a beloved child of God, created in the image of God. So once a week, stop trying to make this beautiful world whole. Slow your roll and let God refresh your soul.